Hey Stitchers, your girl Chris here. Welcome back to my channel on social where it's totally cool to be obsessed with sewing. So for today's video, I want to talk to you about full bust adjustments, and I'll be demonstrating for you how to go about performing this adjustment on a bodice with gathers at the shoulder line and at the waistline. So if this is something that you might be interested in, then please keep on watching. All right, so before I get into the demonstration, let's first talk about one, what a full bust adjustment is, and two, how can you tell whether you need to perform this adjustment. Now, a full bust adjustment is a flat pattern adjustment that introduces more width and length into the bust area of your pattern. The second question is, how do you know if you need a full bust adjustment? Now, most pattern companies draft for a sewing B cup. If you have a larger cup than a sewing B cup, then it's more than likely that you could benefit from a full bust adjustment. Now, there are some companies that draft for bigger cup sizes, like for example, Chalk and Notch has two cup size bands, an AB cup and a CD cup. I know Itch to Stitch has cup sizes in a lot of her patterns. Love Notions has two bust cup options, a standard bust and a fuller bust. And there are other pattern companies that sort of have done some of the groundwork for you. Now, even some of the big five companies do have patterns with cup options. There are a few like McCall's and Simplicity Patterns that will tell you that they have been drafted with A, B, C, and D cup size options. So if you are any of those cup sizes, then it helps if you can find a pattern that has been drafted for your cup size. But what happens if you find a pattern that only comes with a B cup size and you really want to make it? Now, I know a lot of you will prefer just to size up your bodice pattern instead of going about performing this adjustment. I don't know if it's because you are intimidated or because it takes time or it requires you to either trace your pattern or to cut up your original pattern. Like, I'm really not sure why so many people avoid doing a full bust adjustment, but in my experience, a full bust adjustment is priceless. Now, I am a sewing C cup. I'm not very well endowed. I'm just one cup size above the standard bust measurements in sewing patterns, but I really still like to perform a full bust adjustment even on patterns where the circumference of the pattern around the bust area has enough ease to accommodate my girls. That is because I have learned and I have said to you that the full bust adjustment not only provides extra width around the circumference of the bust, but it also provides extra length to go over the mound of tissue, which is your bust. Now, if you have a flatter chest, then the distance between your shoulder and your waist when going over your bust apex is going to be shorter than if you have a bigger cup size. The distance between your shoulder and your waist is going to be longer just because there's more volume for your tape measure to go around. Now, how do you determine what your sewing cup size is? Well, you're a seamstress, so you have to use your measuring tape. The first measurement you want to take, and I do have my measuring tape, is around the high bust area. Now, your high bust area is that area just above your breast tissue. It passes under your arm and around your back, just close to where the top of your bra strap will lie. So to take this measurement, you want to wrap your measuring tape around your bust like this. And if we hold mine in place, you can see that mine is just about 39 inches. Now, of course, I have my hands up. I really should be in a relaxed position. And if you can get help, it's always better to have this measurement taken by somebody else so you can keep your hands at your side. But if you're not, it still gives you a pretty good idea of what your high bust measurement is. Let me turn to the back just so you can see how your measuring tape should pass around your back. So your high bust measurement is a circumference measurement. You need the entire circumference around your high bust. Now, once you have this measurement, you want to go ahead and measure your full bust, which is the circumference right over the fullest part of your breast tissue. Now, again, I'm going to wrap my tape around my back like so. and up and over my boobs. And I get a measurement of 41.5 inches. Now, what you want to do is you want to subtract your full bust measurement, in my case, 41.5 inches. I want to then take away my high bust measurement, which was 39 inches, and I get a total of 2.5 inches. So just between a B and a C cup. Now, I'll tell you that your measurements might change just a little bit depending on the bra that you're wearing. So make sure when you take your measurements, you're taking it using the sort of underwear that you contemplate wearing with your bodice that you're making. So again, my measurements in this bra are 2.5 inches. Now again, my high bust measurement is not accurate. I think my high bust measurement is actually 38.5 inches. But because I have my arm sort of up like this just to demonstrate for you, then I think that's probably where I put the additional ½ inch. So again, if you can get help doing this measurement, then that would be my recommendation. So once you know what your full bust measurement is and your high bust measurement is, as I said, you're going to do that quick math problem and work out what the difference is. Now, if your high bust and your full bust are the same, meaning that there is 0-inch difference between your high bust and your full bust, up to a 1-inch difference between your high bust and your full bust, then you'll have a sewing cup size A. If it is 2 inches in difference, then it's a sewing cup size B. If it's 3 inches of difference, then it's a sewing cup size C. If it's 4 inches, then it's a sewing cup size D, and so on and so forth. I want to put in here very importantly that your sewing cup size is not the same as your bra cup size. So you might wear, say, a 36C in a bra, but that is not equivalent to your sewing cup size. You really need to do these two measurements. If I'm not mistaken, I think when you're fitting for a bra, then you do your under bust measurement and your full bust measurement. Don't hold me to it, but I think that's how you arrive at your bra size. So again, your sewing cup size is not to be confused with your bra size. Now, aside from your measurements, there are a few other indications that you can benefit from a full bust adjustment. If you put your top on and it's sort of squeezing your boobs into pancakes like this, or there's gaping if you have buttons down your center front and it gapes, then that is a good indication that you need a full bust adjustment. So too, if you fit your bodice and you turn to the side and your side seams sort of pull forward like this over your boobs, then that is a good indication that you need a full bust adjustment. Now, I wouldn't recommend simply sizing up your pattern, because if you size up your pattern, then of course you're sizing up your shoulders, you're sizing up your waist, etc. And you might not need any additional width in your shoulder area or your waistline area, etc. And you might end up with an ill-fitting garment because then you have shoulder lines that are too long, top bodices around your collar and your neckline which gape because they don't sit flush against your body because you have gone up a size. So my recommendation, and I highly recommend it, is to perform a full bust adjustment. And today I'm going to demonstrate for you how to perform this adjustment on a bodice that has no darts, but has gathering at the shoulder line and at the waistline. So let's get on to doing the actual flat pattern adjustment right now. All right, so I've traced off my front bodice piece and I've just put it on top of this white piece of paper in the hopes that you can see my pencil markings much clearer. So I want to perform a ½ inch full bust adjustment on this pattern. Even though the finished garment measurements for this pattern is 44 inches, I still like to go ahead and perform a full bust adjustment in patterns that do not cater for a C cup. I am a C cup, and technically speaking, this pattern will have enough ease around the bust line based on the finished garment measurements, but I feel much more comfortable when I make a full bust adjustment in my garments, because the full bust adjustment not only adds width to my pattern, but it will also add the required length to go over the bust tissue. So I'm going to demonstrate how to add a full bust adjustment in a bodice just like this that has no darts. So on this bodice, the waistline seam is gathered in, and so is the shoulder seam. So once we do a full bust adjustment on this pattern, we're going to add extra width to your waistline seam and extra width to your shoulder seam, and that width will be taken back up in your gathering once your bodice has been assembled. So this mark right here is the position of the apex. At least this is where the pattern designer contemplates the bust apex will sit. So what I want to do is, this is going to give me a little bit of difficulty because I need to be able to line up my grain line marking with my cutting table that is gridded. So I'm going to have to remove the white backing, and I'm still hoping that it will be easy enough for you to see. So I'm going to go ahead and line up my grain line marking right here with the line on my cutting mat. Now I need to draw a line from the apex point that is parallel to the grain line marking. So I'm just going to draw right here. So that's my first line. My second line is going to be diagonal from the apex point over to the arm side. And I'm going to go just above the arm side notch. My third marking is going to go out to the side seam. So this line is going to be perpendicular to the grain line. So we have 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines. The next step is to cut along your first line right up to your apex point and then pivot over to your arm side. Now you don't want to cut right the way through your arm side. You want to leave enough room to create a pivot point. And to do that, you need to turn your pattern piece around and then cut up in the opposite direction, making sure not to go through your first line. So I think I can cut just a little bit more. Now, once you've got that done, we need to go ahead and open up line 3. Again, we're going to cut along our line, but we're stopping just before the apex point. Now, I should have drawn in a line 4, and your line 4 is going to be perpendicular to your grain line and should run from line 1, which we cut right here, straight across the center front like so. So this is line 4. Now we're not going to cut line 4 just yet. We now need to grab some scrap paper. All right, you guys, the first thing we need to do is to place some scrap paper behind our cut lines, just like so. I'm going to line back up our grain line with the bodice, with the mat, I beg your pardon, and just hold it in place. So I'm going to stick down above line 4. I'm going to attach the scrap paper like so. For the bottom of my pattern piece, I just want to hold it in place for now using a pattern weight. Now I want to do a 1-inch full bust adjustment, which will take this pattern from a B cup up to a C cup. Because I'm performing the adjustment on half of my bodice, I'm going to do half of the amount in the adjustment. So that will be 1/2 inch. So 1/2 of an inch is 1/2 inch. So I'm doing a 1/2 inch adjustment. I'm going to use my gridded ruler and line it up with line 1 and draw a parallel line 1/2 inch away, like so. I'm hoping that you can see my 1/2 inch line. All right, I didn't have it quite centered on my line, and so it looked like it was skewed, but now I fixed it. It's actually correct. So this is 1/2 inch away from line 1. Now that we have the piece 1/2 inch, we want to shift this portion of our pattern so that the apex point is now a 1/2 inch away from the original line. So we're going to line it up with that line that we just drew in place. You want to make sure that your pattern piece remains flat and is not buckling in any of the cut lines. So we want to make sure it's nice and flat. I'm going to hold it into place and then tape my apex right along my 1/2 inch marking. Once I've held it in place there, then I'm going to tape all the way down my pattern piece. We also want to tape down what now looks like a bust dart, like so. So we have now created more room for our bust apex right in this area. You notice now that there is a jog in my waistline section of my pattern. And to fix that, we're going to cut along this line right here. Like so. We separated it completely from our pattern piece. Now, as a guide, I'm going to line my ruler up with my new line and just mark back in the 1/2 inch, just to make sure that I'm maintaining the 1/2 inch distance right the way down. Now I did put just a little guideline on this side of my bodice, and I'm going to line my ruler up with it and extend it across my scrap paper like so. Now what we're going to do is we're going to slot back in this part that we just removed, and we're going to line it up with the 1/2 inch line in this direction and with the guideline in this direction, and we're going to tape it into place. All right, so now that we have that in place, our waistline seam now can line up. We just need to go ahead and through the waistline seam by blending it together across the cut line like so. Now for this portion, we're going to need some additional scrap paper to fit in this part of the bodice that we have cut apart. All right, so I've grabbed some more scrap paper and I'm just going to slot it in behind my bodice. I will tape the top section into place first, making sure that everything is taut and there is no buckling in my pattern. And then I'm going to go ahead and tape the bottom piece of the bodice into place, like so. And this is the first part of our FBA. Now our front line right here will now have like a jog, and to remedy that, we want to line up the end of our bodice and just blend it back up into the top of the bodice so that we have a new center front line, which is this one right here. All right, now that we have completed this part of the adjustment, you would notice that we now have what looks like a dart towards the side seam of our bodice. Now, if we were working on a different pattern, then we could have left this dart in. But because this pattern has gathers at the waistline and at the shoulder line, I'm actually going to go ahead and get rid of this dart. So let me show you how to do that. All right, to get rid of my side seam dot, I'm first going to extend line 1 right the way up to my shoulder seam, like so. I'm then going to draw over my dart point right here, because I'm going to end up closing this line up and opening it up on this side. So we'll cut along the dart line up to the pivot point, taking care not to cut through the pivot point. We're then going to cut down from the shoulder line again to the pivot point, taking care not to cut through the pivot point. Once we have our lines cut, we're going to go ahead and close up this dart by bringing the top piece of the dart back down to meet the bottom of the dart. All right, I think I could cut it open just a little bit more at the pivot point. All right, so I'm going to close down the top of my dart and sliding it back into place like so, in effect closing out my dart, and then I'm going to tape it into place. So the dart that we had put in with our full bust adjustment, we have now taken it back out. In doing that, we have spread apart our shoulder seam, and you can see now our bodice piece has opened quite significantly at the shoulder line. Again, we're going to need some scrap paper. Big enough piece. And we're going to slip our scrap paper behind our pattern like so. Hold it into place with our pattern weights, and then go ahead and tape it into place along the cut line. So by doing this, we have increased the volume of the gathers at the shoulder seam. Like so. Now let me talk to you about this 1/2 inch that we included in our full bust adjustment at the waistline. So this inclusion will have the effect of giving an extra inch of ease at your waistline seam. However, because this seam is gathered in, this extra intake will just get gathered in and create more volume around the mound of the bust, where we need the most shaping from the full bust adjustment. So again, if we were doing a different type of bodice, then we would have wanted to go ahead and either remove this 1/2 inch from our side seam or included it in a waistline dart. But because of the type of bodice this is, again, it is gathered along the bottom waistline seam, this additional 1/2 inch is just going to get taken up into those gathers. So this 1/2 inch will get taken up into the gathers, and this extra, let's see how much it is, just about 1 3/4. This extra 1 3/4 inches of ease will just get taken up into the shoulder gathers. Now our shoulder line has been distorted by this adjustment, and so I need to go back and true in my shoulder line. In order to make this easier, I'm going to grab my original pattern piece and try to line up the shoulder, and then I'm just going to go ahead and true it. Just like so. Okay, that's a little bit untidy because I've done it at an angle because I'm trying to demonstrate for you on film, but I'm going to go back in and just smooth back out my line so it's much tidier. So this is what the completed full bust adjustment is going to look like. Now transforming my B cup original pattern into a pattern that will better accommodate a C cup. All right, so now that we have trued up our shoulder seam, we have trued up our waistline seam, we should also true back up our side seam. Then you have completed your adjustment and you can go ahead and cut away all the excess paper right around the perimeter of your pattern piece. All right, so this is what my completed front bodice piece now looks like. I've gone ahead and removed all of the excess paper around the perimeter of my pattern, and I have gone ahead and performed just a couple other adjustments to my front bodice piece. I have removed a 1/4 inch in length between my shoulder and my apex, just because I'm quite short-waisted and quite petite in my bodice front above my waistline. Now I've also gone and shortened my bodice piece by a 1/2 inch below the bust. Again, I am short-waisted and usually McCall's pattern pieces are too long for me at the waistline seam. So I went ahead and shortened this one by a 1/2 inch. I also went ahead and performed a 1/2 inch sloping shoulder adjustment because I do have bad posture. I want to go ahead and blame it on all the computer work that I do and on hunching over my sewing machine. So I've gone ahead and made an adjustment for that, a 1/2 inch sloping shoulder adjustment. So those are the changes that I made to my front bodice piece. I'm now going to go ahead and trace out my back bodice piece. And I do have to make some adjustments to my back bodice piece. It's important to note, you guys, that the full bust adjustment is only done on your front bodice piece. It is not done at all on your back bodice piece. So if the only adjustment that you need to this pattern is a full bust adjustment, then once you have followed the tutorial that I have demonstrated, then you will be done and ready to cut out your fabric pieces. I just wanted to come back and share with you an added step that some of you might require when you perform a full bust adjustment on a wrap front bodice piece. Now, it's very normal, I think, for wrap bodices to gape. At least I see a lot of people complaining about gaping fronts in wrap bodices. And I know a lot of the times, to kind of cure that gaping effect, some folks will go in and remove the extra length at your shoulder seam just by sewing your shoulder seams together using a deeper seam allowance than that required by the pattern. Now, I think that this is a quick fix, not the best fix for a gaping front bodice. Instead, what you need to do is you need to create a dart, as it were, in your front bodice piece, which will have the effect of removing some of the length of your center front and then rotating that dart out into one of your existing darts or your existing gathers or what have you. So in this case, as I said before, this bodice has gathers at the waist and it has gathers at the shoulder. Now, because I have already increased the gathers at the shoulders by so much when I did my full bust adjustment, I am now going to increase, as it were, the gathering at the waist. So let me show you how it's done. So for this pattern, I'm estimating based on previous makes of this pattern that I might need to remove just about a 1/4 inch in length from my center front length to prevent any gaping of the pattern piece. To do this, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line that is perpendicular to the grain line and that extends out to your bust apex, like so. I am then going to mark a line that is 1/4 inch above my first line, like so. This is the amount of length that I want to remove from my bodice front piece. Now, once we cut along this line, we're going to need to release the dart that is created. See, for example, if I were to draw from the apex to my 1/4 inch marking, this is what it would look like, sort of like a small dot. Can you see that? I hope you guys can see. What I need to do is to rotate this dot excess into my waistline seam. To do that, I'm simply going to draw my line back up from my waistline seam to my bust apex. So now I have line 1, line 2 is my dot line, and then line 3 is where we're going to go ahead and release the excess. So we're going to cut through line 1 out to the bust apex, but not through it. Then we're going to cut up line 2, again taking care not to go through the bust apex. And your pattern piece now looks like this. Okay, I think I could cut my line 1 just a little bit more. So my pattern piece now looks like this. All right, now that we have our lines cut out, I'm going to swing this bottom portion of my front bodice up to meet that 1/4 inch line that I drew in, and in effect closed out that dot that we had created. And now I need to tape it into place, like so. You will notice that with that adjustment, I have now opened up a little extra in my waistline right here, probably maybe about 1/8 of an inch, or just a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch. Let's see. All right, so it's just between 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. And I need to grab some scrap paper, just a small piece, which I'm going to slip behind my front bodice piece, and then I'm going to just tape it into place, like so. So we have removed 1/4 inch in length right along our front piece, which will have the effect of shortening this front bodice line and hopefully reducing any gaping. Now, I think you get gaping a lot in wrap dresses because the front piece is cut on the bias, and so it's easy, 1, to stretch it out of place, and 2, because the fullness of the bust is like this. Let's take this as the bust. Now we have affected our length on this side and our dart on this side. And so we still have this side that we have done nothing to. So this adjustment aims to reduce the length on this side, all leading towards the bust apex. I hope that that explanation helps. And again, if you find that you have gaping in your wrap bodice front pieces, then you can go ahead once you've made your 12, for example, and pinch out the excess along your front piece where you have your gaping, and then you can resort to performing this adjustment on your flat pattern piece. Now, just before we call it quits, because we have swung this piece upwards, we have thrown the bottom portion of our bodice piece off grain. And so we need to go ahead and correct our grain line. Like so, and to correct our center front line, like so. And I'm just going to put 2 lines just to demarcate my new grain line. So you notice our grain line has been skewed about 1/8 of an inch from this adjustment. So it's very important to go back in and correct your grain line on your pattern piece. Now again, we would have just a little bit of jogging in our center front piece that we also need to go ahead and true up. Okay, it looks like I'm going to need to add just a little bit of extra paper behind my center front piece. And then I'll be able to go in and re-true my center front line. And again, you want to just true up your waistline seam just like this and trim off your excess paper like so. All right, so now we have a completed front bodice piece, and I can go ahead and cut out my wrap piece out of my fabric. All right, you guys, there you have it. That was my illustration of a full bust adjustment on a dartless bodice that has gathering at the shoulder line and at the waistline. I'm really hoping that you guys enjoyed this tutorial today and that you would have learned something from the tutorial. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below and let me know whether you shy away from this adjustment, whether you will now consider doing this adjustment now that you have seen this tutorial. Just drop all your comments in the comments box down below and let us talk about boobs. Now, aside from that, if you have made it to this far into the video, please consider subscribing to my channel. It costs you absolutely nothing, but it guarantees you a spot in my sewing community right here on YouTube. And of course, turn on your notification icon so you never miss any of my upcoming videos. But that is all I needed to share with you guys for today. So until next time, stay calm, stay cool, stay safe, and absolutely keep sewing. Peace.